Hello, welcome to the Hell Project. I'm here with Darren, and we're going to be talking about Matthew chapters 16 to 18 and how it does not teach eternal conscious torment. That's pretty much basically where we're starting. We might as well lay our cards on the table. If you're new to the channel, if you're watching this because it's popped up in your algorithm, look at all our other videos. This is the 10th part of this series, and you'll find out a bit about Darren. You'll find out a bit more about Matthew. You'll get the context of what we're talking about tonight. I'm trying to think when the first time we started this series. It must be over. It's been
a long time.
It's been a while. We're just going to get stuck in, and these conversations are pretty much like a Bible study in the sense. We read the passage, we talk about it, we dig into it, especially focusing on the bits that are about God's judgment, hell, in the traditional sense, and we discuss why our view is different to the traditional view that hell is this eternal place of ongoing torment and fire and consciousness. And a better view of God's judgment and scripture is about God's judgment being the end of life. People will face God and they will die. They will perish. They will face the wages of their sin, all that stuff. And we think the Gospel of Matthew teaches that, despite some verses from Matthew often being quoted to say otherwise. So here we are, Matthew 16. We're going to read that.
Well, we don't need to read the whole thing. We did Matthew 16 last time.
We did, didn't we?
So what you can do, we can point everyone back to the previous live stream, and we did a bit of more of a overview of what we've done thus far, and we did a lot of Matthew. But at that time, I just passed over this Matthew 18:16 because I noticed it was Hades. Yeah, okay,
16,
something like that. Had a look at it recently again, and this is what you should do with exegesis. You learn something. I thought, oh, hang on, that's And as I was reading the commentators and that, they're talking in a way I'm thinking this really fits conditionalism. I've since been given a video by someone in Rethinking Hell from Michael Heiser, and I think that actually supports what I'm saying. But I don't need to mention that, go through that today. But I'm becoming more convinced that Matthew 16:18 itself is very, very much fits with conditionalism, probably better than eternal conscious torment.
So let's read 16:13 to 19. We'll revisit that, and then we'll crack on through to chapter 18, which has a decent amount. So
with 17 there isn't much, so we're just going to let people read that and just link.
Yeah, true that. Right, what I'll do is I will, for those who don't have it accessible on
I should say too, everyone, my computer is failing, so if it shuts down, I'll be back. So print out my notes too. So I've got to buy a new one.
Here we go. Where are we? 16. We say 13 to 19.
Yeah.
Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah. The flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." And he strictly charged the disciples to tell no one that he was the Christ.
Yeah. Now, I haven't got this in the notes, but if you notice, the thesis I'm working with is that Matthew has an apocalyptic worldview. It doesn't mean that he's like Revelation and you can see scenes of battles in heaven, but actually the character. So we're talking about narrative. So I'm talking about Jesus as a character as Matthew develops him. He's not saying he's a fictional person. Yeah. He's real, but the way that he's characterized, he's got Jesus going. So from about, I think so. Okay, you've got his baptism, heaven's open up to him. He's got access to heaven. And then the devil comes and tempts him. He defeats the devil. And then from then on, he's going around doing his ministry. But at times, he's actually casting demons out. Mm-hmm. And these demons, often that possession is connected to people being ill, or the demons are trying to throw them in fire or kill them. Yeah. So when Jesus' ministry when you see the aspect of him casting them out, it's also part of his healing ministry and rescuing us from death. Here, he's handing that over to them. He's actually that ministry. When you've got statements like, "I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loose in heaven." He's actually bringing them them into that ministry. So just keep that in mind. That this does have something to do with victory over Satan and his hordes, right? So if you go back to 13, we find out. So chapter 13, we find out that Satan, the devil, everyone, they're all going to be thrown into a fire and killed. So there's an ultimate defeat. They're going to be slain. But here he's moved on and he's actually commissioning them again into that ministry that he's had, but he's broadening it out. So the thing that I want to look at, not so much as what is meant by you are Peter, on this rock I'll build my church as such, but the qualification, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So it is a feminine noun and church is a feminine noun. And the gates of hell shall not prevail against it is a qualification of the church, not of anything to do with Peter. And rock, I think that's debated, but I didn't want to get into that. Someone shared with me Heiser's video, and I think it fits what I would say here anyway, but I haven't got time to go into it. So does that make sense, Philip?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a consistent aspect of how I probably have read it anyway, in terms of recognizing that hell being Hades and not hell being Gehenna.
Yeah.
It seems quite significant that is the message throughout, is that Jesus is defeating death, rather than getting caught up that gates are defensive and all that. It's just saying, I think you refer to some of the other scriptures where this kind of reference comes out, isn't it, with Genesis and
like typically. Now Heiser's actually making something out of rock, and he's saying it's a specific place. I really want to unpack that and build that into what I would say here, but I haven't had time to do that. But the two ways that normally in the commentaries they'll deal with this, they'll focus on gate as being a fortification. So they'll go back to Genesis 22:17 or Psalm 127:5, where it talks about a gate and it's being a fortification that you I'll just read out Genesis 2:17. This is what they say. I'm not saying this is necessarily what it means. It says, "I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and as the sand that is on the seashore, and your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies." So there's that idea of fortification that's been
overrun
and breached.
Yeah,
you possess their gates. So that's what's in view, and then they'll interpret that the gates of hell as being storming the realm of Satan, something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I definitely get that aspect of it. And
so I do think there's something in Matthew with that, because of what I said about this apocalyptic worldview, where Jesus has been going around confronting them and defeating them, and now he's bringing them into that. That's certainly, I have a little bit of sympathy with that, but that's not all there is, and that's, you can't just stop there.
Yeah.
So another group of scholars, and this is more the consensus view, is that there's the phrase itself, the gate, rather than just focusing on gate, they focus on things like where there's Job 17:16 says, "Will it go down to the bars of Sheol?" The bars aren't strictly a gate. The Hades isn't there. It is translated in the Septuagint, but it's bars, not not gates, but that's the idea. Then you get to Job 38:17. It says, "Have the gates of death been revealed to you? Have you seen the gates of deep darkness?" Sorry. Now, deep darkness. The Septuagint has gates there, but it has gates of death. And then you've got, so this is again what scholars are pulling up. They're saying, look, this is where we're seeing a familiar theme. Psalms 9:13, "Be gracious to me, O Lord, see my affliction from those who hate me. O you who lift me up from the gates of death." Okay. Again, gates is there, death is there. Not strictly Hades, but Hades, it's close enough. Then you get the Psalms, because Hades is the realm of the dead. Even if, like, hey, you're a dualist and you say, okay, it's ordinary death. Your body's died, and your soul, which is really in the Old Testament, is like a shade if you take that point of view. That's death. That's ordinary death. So the Hades and death really go hand in hand. That's what they're seeing. Where are we? Psalm 107, verse 18, "They loathed any kind of food and they drew near to the gates of death." They're dying. They're not eating and they're dying. So you see how that's working. Now Isaiah 38, 9-12, I think it's in 9. 10, verse 10. So Isaiah 38:10, it says, "I said, in the middle of my days I must depart. I am consigned to the gates of Sheol." And that's translated in the Septuagint as gates of Hades for the rest of my years. And then you've got wisdom. So we're out of the Old Testament into the Apocrypha. Wisdom 16:13, "For you have the power over life and death. You lead mortals down to the gates of Hades." So the gates of Sheol. That pulas heidu is the same phrase that's being used in Matthew.
Right.
So that's why that's And you got 3rd Maccabees 5:51. It says, and cried out with a very loud voice, imploring the ruler over every power to manifest himself and be merciful to them. And they stood now at the gates of death. Sorry. No, the gates of Hades, that is. That's not gates of death.
So that should be Hades.
Yeah. Well, no. I pulled that one because Hades is translated as death.
Oh, I see. That's
see how close the association is. They're seeing that the translators themselves know, I know it's Hades, but they're not loading it up with the Greek mythology. They're just, it's death.
That's really interesting that that's actually been. Well, okay. Because with Sheol they do that a bit in modern translations a little, where Sheol is the grave, the pit, not the pit, but there's definitely death involved. But when it comes to the New Testament, modern translations tend to avoid that, and it's just interesting that I've not seen that as a choice from a translation before. I don't think.
No,
it's not.
But aside from that, these same traditionalists, I mean, R.T. France was an annihilationist, but the rest of them that I was looking at, Carson or whoever, they're noting this, and they're the ones saying that this has to do with death. They're looking at all that, and even though it's translated as bars of Sheol, or no, it's bars of Sheol, or you've got gates of death. They're saying this has to do with ordinary death, not me. So when you get that, you go, okay, all right. I can see that association. The question is that supported within the text of Matthew itself? Yeah. So it's one thing to say there is a Old Testament background, or there's a literary context, which I think there is. I think that is a clear little motive. There's no reason why Jesus and his audience wouldn't have been aware of it. But in Matthew itself, you've gone back, if you look back to, say, Matthew 10, where Jesus is commissioning the disciples. So he says, you're going to face the prospect of being slain. It's not just persecution, but it's being killed. And then you've got Matthew 10:28, don't fear the ones that can kill you. And then you've got later on in 39, he who loses his life will save, for my sake will save it. That kind of stuff going on. That's also back, I think, is it in this context, or is it, no, that comes in 18, I think. But there's that kind of motif that's been evident within Matthew. And so to me, I can see reasons why we would say from Matthew that with gates of death, gates of Hades here, he's talking about, he's got the idea that death, like in Matthew, this death at the hands of men isn't going to hold you down. It's not going to conquer the church. That's not going to be something we have to worry about. Then after Matthew 16:18, then Jesus goes on, he talks about his own death and resurrection as if he's reminding them, well, I'm leading the way in that. I'm going to be resurrected. From that point, he starts talking about that.
That's interesting.
So he's commissioning them. He's telling them death won't hold the church down. And he's saying, hey, I've got to die, but I'm going to be resurrected. It's necessary.
Yeah.
And that's why you get, I know I'm talking a lot here, that's why you get, I agree with this summary statement from, where are we, from Grant Osborne. He says the consensus view today, probably the correct one, is best stated in Paul's view of Isaiah 25:8 and Hosea 13:14. Death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? So he goes on. So that's from 1 Corinthians 15. He goes on, with Jesus' death and resurrection as the first fruit and the eschatological promise of the people of God, death cannot overpower the believer. Gates here are fortifications, and the church will never be extinguished. So he's actually bringing that in. Now, this is in his commentary on this verse. So he's actually seeing what Jesus is saying. He's seeing the background. He's seeing what Matthew, how he unpacks his theology, and he's saying, hey, that fits with what Paul's saying. So I think, that's a good CI text, because it's only the church that conquered, for whom we can say death will be conquered.
Yeah, and that's not even just. So I suppose a traditionalist could probably, and has agreed, like much of that's done by a traditionalist framework, but that does undercut universalism somewhat, does it not?
Well, yeah, but I think what a universalist would say is eventually everyone's going to belong to the church. So,
would they? I suppose yes, in a sense, but the church is very much this age, isn't it? This is the church age.
Yeah, but I mean, the church is the gathering. I think ecclesia. Look, I'm not necessarily arguing for it, but I think that's what they'd say. Like everyone's going to be converted to that. It's just post death, and so it won't. Yeah. So I'm not intending to make an argument against universalism from this, but I am intending to say that if traditions are pulling the meaning out of, are looking at the text and they're saying this has to do with ordinary death. It's not spiritual death. It's ordinary death. The church, ordinary death won't hold the people of the church. Because of Christ.
Yeah.
Okay. That's conditionalist. Yeah. Because if you haven't got Christ, haven't got that resurrection, that kind of resurrection he has. So death isn't going to be something that conquers that non-church people or non-believers or outside Christ or whatever. Is going to have. Yeah. So I know they're going to integrate that into their system, but I think that's very much CI and not so much VCT.
I think I'm there, just in terms of figuring out where that undercuts CCT. I'm still pondering I wasn't expecting to ponder the universalist aspect as much, but just the way that you mentioned it's the church.
Yeah.
Because death, those who die outside of the church, in the sense
if you have the view that people die, and once you die it's settled, and you haven't been part of the church, then it would exclude universalism. But if you've got the idea that there's post-mortem chances to become saved, whether that's in the afterlife, intermediate state, or at the resurrection or after the resurrection, during the punishment, or that's part of it, and they'll all eventually become part of that. Church is technically just saying people of God.
Yeah.
Then you're going to be more open to the idea that this could fit with universalism. Yeah. So you actually have to answer other questions. This alone wouldn't do it.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
And I'm not saying here this disproves ECT. I'm saying this fits better with CI than ECT.
Yeah,
because it's talking about death itself, ordinary death, not conquering the church, not conquering the people. That wouldn't make sense if the problem wasn't death itself. Like if they're saying it's spiritual death, you're being thrown into, that's not what's in view. This whole idea of being thrown in a lake of fire and you got spiritual death and you're alive anyway. I know it's a poor quality of life. It's not with God. That's not what's in view here. It's actual ordinary death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will go be chewing on that one for a bit.
That's fine. Chew on it. I mean, that's why you do this. And there could be counterfactuals. There could be stuff that I've missed, and that's fine. But I'm throwing that out there. I'm happy to do that. Fits better with CI. Yeah, is the thesis.
Sounds good. I agree. It's a
you know what it's summed up in? It's John 3:16.
It is. Yeah.
Fits with that idea really well, and
it definitely fits better. The ordinary understanding of death is the end of life. That the church is then rescued out of that. All of that. You don't have to start worrying about death being an existence of poor quality of life. All of that definitely fits better within CI. I guess, and so it definitely fits better. I'm not, as you say, I don't think it's a defeater of ECT, no. but it definitely fits better. Then I would say that. Cool.
Okay, we can move on, but just go back to Paul, where he's Osborne. I think he's bringing Paul in. That's victory over real death. That's ordinary death. It's not victory over spiritual death. And so where actual ordinary normal death won't hold us. That's not true of unbelievers. They will actually be dead.
I don't have to stop. I don't have to continue to explain what death is to get you to understand hell to be.
So the positive statement that they are slain is Matthew 10:28. The body and the soul. So whether that's, you're saying that you got a dualistic framework there and you're saying the soul and the body will actually be slain, or whether soul is life. So the resurrection life is taken away, not just temporarily by men. However you look at it, the idea is they're slain. If you end up in Gehenna, you're slain. But in Matthew 16:18, death, so the gates of Hades, ordinary death, so dying, will die, but that won't hold us. Jesus will go and be resurrected. Death won't hold us. We'll be resurrected to life. Makes sense.
Amen. It is good. Okay. It is good. While I'm chewing on it, in terms of trying to see if I can get what used to be about my traditionalist hat on for a bit, I can't make it work. But if I was a traditionalist, I would have to reframe death to be not that ordinary, and like you said, the poor quality of life. Ongoing existence. So it definitely.
The absolute fantastic thing about these is that most traditionalists haven't thought about it, so they haven't figured out how to make spiritual death fit here. You got a puppy.
That's my dog. He's just gone for a bit of a stretch.
That's why I like honing in on these. If it didn't pan out, it didn't pan out. But there's this traditionalist scholars saying this. It's not me necessarily. I can add to it. But they haven't, it's not on the radar for traditionalists to say that's spiritual death. So it's like, this is a nice one. It's a nugget. So if you quote John 3:16, they'll go, perishes. That's talking about a poor quality of life. You're perishing, spiritual death, and that I posted on this verse in another group, and that's the first thing a person said. There's three kinds of death. These are spiritual death. It's like, as if that's relevant to this particular text. Just because spiritual death might be in Ephesians 2:1 doesn't mean that when Jesus when Matthew talks about Jesus dying or being destroyed, that's a spiritual death. That's just ordinary death. So you don't just transpose one context to the other. But they haven't had a chance to do that here, so I don't know how they would do it.
No.
So that's why I like highlighting these.
Yeah.
We should move on.
We should, but no, it's good. We could labour that point for a little while longer, I think. So if you are a traditionalist and you come across this, let us know how you read that and why you think that why death needs to be. I'm careful with saying redefine, but that's how I feel traditionalists have to redefine what death is to fit the whole.
I think it's probably, I don't use that response as much, because I think what they're doing is they're trying to say, this is how we think the Bible speaks about death in various ways.
That's fair.
I don't think they're necessarily redefining death. I think what they're doing is they're saying that the words of like thanatos or necros have that scope of meaning where it includes that. So they're adding to that as part of the lexical entry, but I don't think they're redefining it, because when you hear them talking, they talk about death in the same way as we do. It's just when the theological framework just gets put on there, and they're used to seeing this idea of the Bible does at some point talk about living people in some way being dead, and you could say that Ephesians 1.
Yeah,
2:1. Sorry.
It's
this idea that they're alive, but in some way dead. And you can say they're spiritually dead. I just don't think we just shove that everywhere. You don't go, you got to still exegete each text as it stands. It doesn't mean that Revelation 20 is talking about spiritual death. I mean, it's a different word altogether. The word death's different, and you got to read that in its own context. But that's where they tend to go. So I don't usually use that argument, redefining or. That's an aside. We should. 17 doesn't have anything.
No, it doesn't have that much.
So we'll let people read that.
Yeah, it's the Transfiguration.
Yeah.
So more. I know you sort of mentioned it before we came on live. There's very much about sort of almost the apocalyptic aspects of Christ coming. More about who the Son of Man is and who his deliverance, and that he will be killed and raised. I'm sure we could probably find some stuff about CI in this, but we're both aware this is part 10 of Matthew, and we've still got 10 chapters to go, and 18 has more.
18 1 to 14 is a real killer. It's a big. It's a 18 8 to 9 is really at the center of the debate a lot of the time, and I think this is really where we're more overtly getting into some of the things that Jesus is saying, that's a positive statement, saying that people who end up in Gehenna are going to be killed, slain. So I think it's worth putting more emphasis on that, even though I've dragged it out with the other one.
It's all good. Let's go to it. So we'll skip over Matthew 17.
Just read 18 1 to 14.
Cool. Let's do
I
that.
actually think that's one unit.
1 to 14. So I will share it on the screen so people can read along if they don't have a Bible accessible. Let me just do that. Here we go. Reading from the ESV version. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And calling to him a child, he put him in the midst of them and said, "Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world for temptations to sin, for it is necessary that temptations come, but woe to the one by whom the temptation comes. And if your hand or your foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life crippled or lame than with 2 hands or 2 feet to be thrown into the eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than with 2 eyes to be thrown into the hell of fire. See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you that in heaven the angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly, I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. So it's not the will of my Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish.
Yeah. So just as this is not in the notes, but the reason I'd say there's one unit is because I kind of see what's called an inclusio here when he says little ones at the end, and he was talking about little ones at the beginning. Yeah. So there's this what's called, it's like you think of that as a parentheses. So you've got the narrative, and then you've got, so they'll do it in the letter. Paul does it too. So they'll repeat a statement, or there's a similar verse, a theme. It's called an inclusio, right? So everything in between, you kind of, it's not like a strict parallelism where everything goes into the center like a chiasm.
Yeah.
It's just that okay, he's just here, he's marking off it like we would have a separate paragraph, yeah, in a larger what I call a pericope or passage. Yeah. So just so everyone knows why I said that.
Yeah.
Now, before I want to get into discussing what it means, I wanted to highlight that after studying Matthew, from Matthew 1 to this chapter, I can see ways in which Matthew is alluding back to previous passages. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things that we tend to do in debates is jump from one text like Matthew 18, 8 to 9, then we go to 25, 41, 46. Oh, eternal fire. We'll go to Jude.
Yeah.
We'll go to Revelation. But we don't really stop to think and see how Matthew is developing things. There's actually, I think, 4 ways in which he alludes back to previous verses in his narrative. So is it okay if I just work through them and tell you what they are?
Yeah, just go for it.
Tell our listeners. Yeah. Okay. Okay. In verse 6, you've got this phrase, causes to sin. So where are we? But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin. So causes to sin is just from one word. It's scandalizo. It's the basic sense just means causes stumble, but it's used to talk about causing others to fall away or cause to sin. That verb is used in Matthew 5, 29 to 30. Can you pull that up?
Yes.
Show them. Yeah.
Yeah, getting that. Let's do that. Matthew 5. What was it? 29.
Sorry, 29 to 30.
29 to 30. Yeah. Yeah. Let me share my screen. Where are we? There. Matthew 5. 29 to 30. There we go. So we got. Yeah. So we have read. I can't even. Don't know why it's not highlighting the section I want it to. There you go. 29 to the right hand. Yeah. It's all there.
You want me to read it out or you?
Here we go.
There you go. It's the same thing as you're getting in Matthew 18, 8 to 9.
Yes,
if a body part,
apart from
body part, eye or hand, if it's causing you to stumble, to sin, get rid of it.
Yeah.
Or you'll end up in hell. So hell is Gehenna with its whole Old Testament background. You've got Jeremiah. It's you've got birds feasting on dead corpses and all that. And then Isaiah 30, it's likened to, so this is Topheth, or the Valley of Hinnom. It's likened to a funeral pyre. You've got that whole background. Don't buy in the idea that Gehenna was a garbage dump. That's a myth. There's no evidence for that at all. Nothing. No, the literary evidence is bad.
Coming up in this Step Bible thing. So I don't know if you've come across Step Bible. I've just clicked on Gehenna.
Yeah, I use it. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've actually said, once celebrated for the horrid worship of Moloch, and afterwards polluted with every species of filth, as well as the carcasses of animals. Constant fires were kept burning. I don't recall that. I think it's 1200 AD was the sort of earliest.
David Kimchi. That's the only evidence. There's no archaeological evidence. So people will evoke that because they're taught it. But there's when scholars have actually gotten into archaeologists and I think George Beasley Murray had a look into the literary evidence. The earliest, it's really, really late. It's some commentary, and David Kimtree's got on Psalms. He's in the 12th century. The archaeology is really doesn't support it.
Yeah.
There's a great commentary, and we've discussed this verse already, so I didn't want to go into it, but I just love talking about it. There's a commentary on geography, the Lexham commentary on the geography of the Gospels. It's available at Logos. It's got a nice little article talking about why Gehenna, the Valley of Hinnom, I should say, it wasn't a garbage dump. Things like we know that the Kidron Valley, the slope on the other side of Jerusalem was, because the archaeology shows that, and they buried it, and it was pottery, so they didn't burn it anyway. They didn't dump the Romans didn't dump their enemies that way. They didn't burn them that way. If they did burn them in the Valley of Valley of Hinnom, or what we think of as Gehenna, the wind would have come over the top of the really rich part of town. There's nothing really that supports it. But people will go back to an older encyclopedia, like from 100 years ago, or even some commentators still say it, and they go, "Oh, look, they're saying it." But there's no actual evidence for it.
Yeah,
it's the Old Testament and the intertestamental period where you get this sense. It's that valley symbolizes this idea of destruction. And then as soon as you mention Gehenna, like, okay, in Matthew 5, we've got it. You've got 10 where we were overtly told that they will be slain.
Yeah.
So we've covered all that. So when Jesus is talking here in Matthew 18 about these little ones, and you've got this scandalizo that caused them to fall, he's alluding back to this stuff. He's not just, when I do a word search, and I can use the Step Bible program to do a word search, that's where he's bringing that language up.
Yeah.
Now, if you're a hearer in the Greek and you're an audience and they read it out and then you're reading it in Greek, that stands out, especially on a reading upon a reading upon a reading, which is what all my exegesis lecturers told me to do. So I see that as happening. Now, that's not the only one, but there's a noun. Where are we? I'm just going down to my notes. The noun, there's a cognate. So the scandalizo is from scandalon. It means you are, or a thing is a stumbling block that causes others to stumble. You're the stumbling block. That noun is used in 1341. Now, do you remember that passage?
1341. That's the. So I'm just going back to it. 13. It's around Son of Man coming back to burn them with fire, isn't it? 41. Yeah. Son of Man will send his angels, and they'll gather out his kingdom of all causes of sin and all lawbreakers. Yeah. And
so causes of sin could be generic inanimate things. I don't think so. I think he's got here people causing others. Now that whole parable of the seed, he's sowing the seed, is this. We've addressed this. We've got a video on this. It's worth going over again. You've got the parable itself, and you've got this guy goes out, the master, whoever, I can't remember who it is, the primary farmer. He sows the seed, then the enemy comes in, he sows the tares, which look like wheat, and they're not, and they find out, no, we got to wait till the end till we get rid of it, or we'll destroy the church. We'll destroy the wheat, basically. And then Jesus has an interpretation where he allegorizes it. You've got, he identifies who the enemy is, the devil. So he's really the ultimate cause of this in this context, cause of all that goes wrong, cause of others sinning, causes, to stumble or to cause to sin, that kind of thing. So when Jesus is saying in 40 that all of that's going to be gathered up and thrown in there and burned as if they're the weeds, burn up, incinerated, right? He's alluding back to that, isn't he? When he uses that same kind of noun. So there's two instances. He's using the verb to go back to and talk about Gehenna. He's using the noun to refer back to, I guess, to a passage where he's clearly said that all of these antagonists will be burnt up.
Yes.
And out of that, at the end, that's once they're burnt up, that's when, so in 43, that's when the the righteous will shine like the sun.
Yeah.
After that. So that's after the closing of this age. Yeah. So I just wanted to highlight that, because I think Matthew is deliberately trying to remind us of those texts, so we reinterpret this in light of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Sorry, I just accidentally muted myself. I think that's it's interesting. The use of the one. I've never noticed that before. Way to the one by whom the temptation comes. I think probably in my mind that puts more weight to what you're saying in terms of alluding back to the one who causes sort of the enemy in the sense of.
Yeah, well, back in 1341, it's all. So you can trace back a little bit, and you can see Jesus talking about what's deep down inside of a person is what causes them to sin, and they cause others. And yeah, you do trace that through. So I can't go through all of that, but that's a comprehensive statement that all causes, all scandalons.
Yeah.
And all wall breakers. It's actually just a re-emphasis, I think. It might have two sides of the same coin, but he's not saying inanimate things. He's definitely talking about things that people and entities like Satan and people, the Pharisees or whoever,
anyone
who cause
who,
others, they're going to get. Yeah, that's the kind of evil that the enemy sowed in there, and that's going to be done away with. Yeah, they're weeping and gnashing, but the weeping and gnashing, they're incinerated, they're dragged there, thrown in and incinerated. So that's not ECT, that's destruction. They're gone.
Yeah.
Matthew. So, and because you've got Gehenna mentioned in 18, and you've got alluding back to 5:29 to 30, and that says Gehenna, we can bring in Matthew 10:28, I think, because of that Gehenna. So he's actually unpacking that, and it's like, why would we ignore that? Those allusions back. There's another way he does it, but no one. I don't think anyone's made these observations, but I noticed that at the end of Matthew 18:14, where he says that one of these little ones should perish. So he's basically, the idea here is that the movement of thought's moved on. There's 99 that are safe. There's that 1%, 1 out of 99. I've got to go. I'm fine. I'm going to rescue them. That they should perish, right? That word perish. The Greek there is apolumi. Yep.
Yeah.
But there's a specific clause. So it's a hina apolaitai. I don't speak Greek really well. I'm not Chris Date. But when I do look that up in my BibleWorks program, the only other place that appears in that form, so in that form plus with hina, the hina clause, is back in Matthew 5:29, 30.
Okay.
Where it's translated differently. Yeah?
Yeah.
So back there it's translated, lose. So when you cut your hand off, you pluck your eye out, you lose it. Yeah, but why are you losing it? Because it's separated, it dies, it's destroyed.
Interesting.
Why wouldn't the same idea be here? It's translated differently.
Yeah.
But the meaning is the same. And perish is being used. But it's leading back to that text again.
So yeah, it's interesting. So the Apollo, so if I'm just looking at this, it brings up another time it's used, but I can't. It says, at least on the Step Bible. Yeah, so it is a little bit of a confusing one in the Step Bible.
Don't get me wrong. Apolumi appears, and it'll probably appear in that passive form in a lot of other places, but it's the hina plus.
It's the bit behind it, and that's only in Matthew 5.
Yeah.
Which is loose.
If I just go, I'll just pull it up from my BibleWorks program. So when you're someone like me and you're used to looking at the Greek text and seeing where and trying to find where words are used similarly. This is second nature.
Yeah.
When I'm introducing it to others. Okay, the only place in the New Testament where this exact hina plus this form of that verb, this passive form comes, is in Matthew 5:29, 5:30, and 18:14 in Matthew. Anywhere,
Right.
it's not anywhere else in the Bible. Now, I think if you heard this, if you're a Greek speaker, if you were listening to this in the first century, that would stand out.
Yeah.
If you get a read, they're reading it out. They're reading it out. You're reading Greek, it would stand out a bit too, but they're hearing it. They're going to hear it. It's going to pull them back to that text. But there in the earlier text, it's the hand that is hina. Was it hina apoletai? It's lost. It's perished because you plucked it out. No one would say that's a spiritual death.
No.
They would actually just say, when you pull your eye out, it's gone. It's destroyed. It's died. Okay. So when he's saying here of these lost sheep, there's little ones that he's finding, so they won't do that same thing. Won't happen to them. That's what he means. It means he's preventing them. He's going out to find them, so they do not perish in that way that the eye and the hand would. So it's better to get rid of the eye and the hand, have that perish, have that destroyed, than have these little ones go into Gehenna and be burned up and destroyed.
Yeah.
And right, see?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is it is quite significant. Yeah, that language. That's so. I guess trying to just clarify this. So in terms of like discussing perish, and Apollo particularly, the pushback is. I'm just seeing if this is actually any pushback at all, but it's. The argument that when it comes to destroy body and soul is that's ongoing sort of destruction, lower quality of life aspect.
Yeah.
And they would
by the way, you're talking about Matthew 10:20, where it's an active verb, means to slay.
So the way that this is
a passive. This is passive. So there's a slight little difference here.
That makes a big
difference. But what you're alluding to is the typical argument that says, okay, there's a range of meaning that doesn't include slaying, doesn't include dying in the normal sense, like perishing, like I'm saying happens to the eye and the hand. Right. And so what they go to the wineskin in chapter 9. Oh, look, it perishes in a way. Yeah, okay, that's an inanimate object. If you did that to this, if you did what? Okay, there's words in that verse that says it's not just perishing, but it's ripped to shreds. It's something that dogs do to you. I can't tell you the exact Greek word.
Yeah,
it's actually in Matthew too, I think, if it's not in Luke. If you did if you do to humans, or step back a bit, if you do to an eye, you pluck it out.
Yeah.
What happens to that wineskin? What would you think would happen to the eye?
But you're not going to be able to see much.
It's dead.
Yeah, it's dead.
Okay, you do that to the whole person.
Yeah,
you kill the person. It's slay. It's an emphatic way of saying killing.
Yeah, it is. It's not. There isn't really much pushback. I guess what I was trying to compare, but even in this one, it's not quite the same. So comparing a wineskin to a body is obviously inanimate to animate. Comparing a hand to a body, they are both animate. And if you obviously cut off your hand, you can't use it as a hand anymore. It's just a lump of flesh that's dead.
Well, I guess they might argue and say it's not fit for purpose.
Yeah.
It's not fit for purpose because it's dead.
Yeah, it's a dead hand, and you would say that. It can't be animated again because it is dead.
Who in their right mind? Honestly, who in their right mind would go, okay, I'm going to cut my hand off, and that doesn't imply that the hand is dead and destroyed. You rip your eye out. Like, it's painful for the person doing it, but that's not the point. It's what happens to that eye. You're destroying the hand and the eye, so it doesn't cause you to stumble, and you don't end up in hell.
Yeah, where you would die, where the whole self,
the whole self. Yeah, but I haven't got to that. I was going to get back to.
Sorry,
Matthew. I'm just trying to give the the context in Matthew that this language doesn't have to do with anything other than either direct destruction or perishing, more in the passive sense. That's patently what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Happy if people push back, but I'll push back again. And if the evidence is good enough, I'll change my mind. There is one other part. I think there's a probably more vague allusion to Matthew 10:28. And I'm not really certain it's an allusion, but it actually, this makes sense in light of Matthew 10:28. So Matthew 10:28, you get this idea that humans can kill a body, not the soul, so that they can inflict the kind of death on people that they can't. That there's one kind, but there's one who can inflict a death that is more comprehensive, and that's in Gehenna. Now, back in Matthew 18, was it 6? Oh, let me have a look at my notes again. It talks about, okay, so 6. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, so yeah, who causes them to sin, who causes them to stumble, it would be better for him to have a great millstone fastened around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. Now, that's hyperbole. The type of millstone is too big for them to ever put around your neck, but it's a human death. So it's humans inflicting that they're drowning you. That's the kind of death that humans would inflict on other humans. That's what Matthew 10:28 is talking about. Can kill the body, not the soul.
Yeah.
But when we get to 8 and 9, so Matthew 18, 8 and 9, we're talking about the eternal fire, so and the hell of fire, so the Gehenna of fire. That's alluding back. That's really fitting with what Matthew 10:28b is talking about, where you're slain in there. So I don't know whether that's a direct allusion, but I used to not be able to figure out why Jesus mentioned this millstone and whether that supported ECT. But once I realized that really that's the kind of death, it would be better to be killed by humans this way than to be thrown into the eternal fire, the hell of fire, where the whole body, the body and the soul, the resurrection life is denied you in Gehenna. I mean, that really fits. So doesn't it?
I mean that progression of this is. Yeah, I wouldn't have made that connection. So I think that is an interesting one that's to kill the body, and then that this is the total destruction that God will do in the Gehenna of fire.
So the theme here is that we're rescuing. Jesus saying, don't cause these little ones, these lost sheep, to stumble. Okay, because you'll end up in Gehenna. But I'm going to go out and stop them. I'm going to prevent them from perishing. And the perishing in there is the same kind of perishing, that when you pluck the eye out. And that's here in 18, 19. So it's better for you. See the poetry here? And the irony? It's better for you to pull this eye out of you, cut your foot off, cut your hand off, than you end up in that fire of Gehenna. Yeah.
Before you go on, sorry. Yeah, before we go on to the next bit, just to jump back a tiny bit. This, I don't know what this means from Slam Moran. I think this is talking about your apolotai.
Yeah, middle. Yeah, he's saying middle. Middle with apolumi is passive. Normally, middle is a reflexive, so you do it to yourself. But with apolumi, it's one of those verbs that is regarded as meaning passive. Yeah. So you'll see the middle form. I probably described it as having a passive form, but it's actually a passive verb from a middle form. Yeah.
I'm going to agree. When it comes to grammar, I have not.
Daniel Wallace's Greek grammar beyond the basics discusses that. So yeah.
For whatever reason, my brain just doesn't hold information about grammar, so I'm still I keep tripping over what an adjective and a verb is, and I'm like, I have to go back to like the primary. A verb is a descriptive. It is descriptive, isn't it? I've already got it.
No. The verb is an action thing. It's a word that you're doing something. Something's done to you. You're doing something.
So I have to Google these things all the time. It's like I can remember random things about where verses of hell are all throughout Scripture, but when you come to grammar and grammatical like definitions, it's gone. My brain just doesn't hold that information. So great. Does that other than so passive? I get what passive is.
Middle is the same. Just think of you doing it to yourself. Okay. I hit myself.
Right.
That's middle. I deny myself the gratification of eating bangers and mash tonight. It's the idea that there's with Greek verbs, there's always, or words in general, there's always more, it's more complex when you get into different subtypes, but that's the general idea. And what the comment was there, but the form is middle. It means it's reflexive. It's you perish, you kill yourself or something like that. It's not. It's apolumi has that middle form. So the words, the form of the would have what we would normally indicate a middle kind of action. You're going to do it yourself, but it's regarded as passive.
Right.
So when we say perish, and we translate it as a passive. So I'm not doing it. I'm not actively killing someone, but I am perishing.
Right.
That passive idea is in there. It's a passive it's a middle form in John 3:16, but it's a passive meaning, perish. Yeah. That's not controversial.
Right.
Yeah, at all.
So here's a follow-up. Strong's puts. I'll put my again. No.
Slam RN. How are you?
Yeah. To destroy fully, literally, or figuratively. How can it be literally or figuratively?
Strong's. I say this a lot. Strong's is more of a listing of how words are translated. It's not a true lexicon. I can share this with you. Slam RN, the article I've got from Gary Shogren, he's a great scholar, ECT guy, but he talks about the limitations of Strong's. So when you see something there, it gives you a basic idea what a word means, but he's not definitive. No, yeah. So when it talks about figurative and so forth, he's just talking about the teaching tradition.
Right. Yeah.
But again, discussion, and Shogren, he actually brings this up quite independently to Glenn Peoples. He says the problem with Strong's is that people think they can just use it like a menu list. Oh, here's a meaning, and I can just use that. That's the what is it? The totality, illegitimate totality transfer.
Yeah.
Fallacy, where you think that every meaning, every aspect, every figurative usage is available for you in this instance, as if you can just choose from that and go, oh, it fits. No, you've actually got to go and do. It gives you an idea of possible usages, and I don't always agree, even with say the proper lexicons. You know, they might go, oh, this is that. Man, I go, oh, I did the exegesis. I go, no, but you can use Strong's and say this is possibly what it means, but then you go and exegete the text. And you go and see whether that fits there. Yeah, is that a figurative usage? Is it not? So here, I don't think the word itself is being used figuratively. So I can't see the exact reference.
No. Cool.
I think when Sam RN's asking about how can it be used figuratively. I can't say my own English words properly, and you're worried about the Greek or literally. The question you got to ask is, in what way would a word be used in a figurative sense? So we can tell in Ephesians 2:1 that it's being used figuratively in some way. Okay, whether that's proleptic or it's prolepsis, so it's like it's talking about someone now. So in the future they'll be dead, but we're talking about in some way they are dead now. That's a prolepsis. So it's the future thing is referred to as being a present thing. Or when you read and if I said to you, you're dead to me, right? That
Mhm.
that phrase, you go, now hang on, you're living, we're talking to each other. I'm not dead. So you think there's something jarring there, and so you must mean one aspect of the word dead. I don't mean you're actually dead. So that's the literal bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just mean that in some way you're dead to me, so we won't
That
communicate. Yeah.
figurative. Yeah.
You get that in Luke where you've got the parable of the prodigal
Lost
son,
son.
right at the
Yeah.
end where the father says, yeah, he was lost, Apollyon, he was lost but found. So he's
Yeah.
lost to me. So it's like he's dead to me.
Yeah.
But earlier on, the son said, I fear I'm going to die from, he's in the big muck and he's like, I'm hungry and I fear I'm going to perish. Just because you have that figurative usage later doesn't mean that the actual meaning
Yeah.
is not in view in that earlier part. I think it's in 14 or 17 of Luke 15. Anyway, the parable.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not right.
So when you get to figurative usage, just because they're using it figuratively in one context doesn't mean it's always used that way. And
Yeah,
that's one of the
really be
mistakes with
careful.
this spiritual death point of view, where you get the language of death being used figuratively to speak in some way of sinners being alive or but still dead in some way. And they transpose that onto context where ordinary death is in view because the word's just being used with its normal sense. It gets tricky when you go, okay, we can use language, and N.T. Wright has described this really well, where he says, you can use language in a figurative sense to talk about a concrete reality. So if I said you're dead to me, it's the word dead is being used figuratively, but I'm talking about a concrete thing there that
Yeah. Yeah.
in one way or the other, we're not going to communicate. We're not. Yeah, you don't exist to me.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to act that way. So there's a concrete reality there, and language can be used in a concrete way, in a literal way, to refer to abstract ideas like love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or N.T. Wright's got a better way of putting it, but so it's complex.
That's really helpful going through that actually, because figurative to describe something concrete, and that's what
Yeah.
a lot that happens quite a bit in scripture, but it's working out through the context what is the concrete that's being described in the situation.
The key question is what is it trying? What is the author trying to communicate? So we work out in Matthew 5:29 to 30 that he doesn't mean that you go and pull your eyes out or cut your hand off. That's hyperbole. So that's not what we're getting at. But he does mean that it's better to actually destroy that body part. Whether or not it's being used figuratively, that's the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. And I think that it's got the basic meaning of the word of perish or there, with this idea that it's being destroyed. You pull it out and it's passively destroyed because I'm doing the action. I'm pulling it out. When it comes to Matthew 18, 14, where you've got the same word, I can't see a figurative use, but if it was, it's still the same idea. Same idea that you want to rescue that his little ones from that kind of fate of destruction, of being destroyed, of dying. Yeah. So you just got to unpack it.
Yeah.
That's all. What's the intended meaning? How is he trying to say it? Gehenna itself is a figurative use of the valley of Hinnom, and they took a real place and they used it in Jeremiah and Isaiah in the intertestamental period to refer to something past it. It's a figurative use of a real place. It's almost like a toponym, but it's giving it more meaning. So they're not exactly the same places, but one have been used to talk about the other. So Gehenna isn't strictly the Valley of Hinnom, but it comes from there. That's the basis of it. And that's why the garbage dump question comes up. If it actually was a garbage dump, then we would think that, okay, that's the source of the image of eternal fire, eternally. It's always burning. Yeah, but that isn't part of the matrix or the background of where that imagery comes from. Yeah. So you got to look elsewhere. So that's where the question of figurative or imagery comes from. So another one would be, okay, let me think. So Matthew 13:40 it's just a statement. There's no, the language is, Katakaya is going to burn them up. But then Jesus in his explanation is using some imagery to talk about that. If I just go there, I've got to go to the, excuse me, because it's a good question. And I like teaching.
This is a perfectly good rabbit hole to go down, because I think figurative, and this is a thing that comes up over and over and over again within the discussion.
So where are we?
Look at Matt 13.
So the one that's obvious to me is the righteous will shine like the sun.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's in 43. After the bad people are burned up, the righteous will shine like. No, we're not going to be in the sky burning suns. Like when you see as or like, that's a simile. So that's a subtype of a figurative way of using language. It's like, so you run like you run like a rabbit. You run fast. It doesn't mean that you have a bushy tail. It doesn't mean that you have. So these kind of metaphors would be like, they would be the sun. Okay. So when I was taught the difference between metaphor and simile, metaphor and simile both have in common this idea that it's just one point of reference. So if I said to you, you're a building, and I mean that you're tall, I don't mean you have windows in your gut. I don't mean I mean you're tall. That's it. That's that's the point of the reference. Yeah. But it's figurative use of language. If I say you like something, you run fast like a rabbit, or you like a rabbit, then I likewise, it's one point of reference. So those people shining like the sun, it's some kind of brightness into you, and that's drawn from Daniel 12 anyway. And a bit of Malachi 4. It's probably a dual reference. But that's an example of figurative language. But what does it mean? What's he trying to get at? Yeah. So I guess you have to have a little bit of a look into Daniel and that. Then. So it's figurative language. But what does it mean? It's literal language. What does it mean? What's he trying to say? And how do you know it?
So there's one. We have gone down this rabbit hole a little bit, which is fine. Very happy to for the question. The question is that in Strong's, it does say it could be both at the same time. How can it literally be?
Well, maybe I don't know. Is he saying in that particular text it's used figuratively and with a literary?
It sounds like
it. Whatever.
basically,
like,
He explained.
That's like
on them to explain.
No. I don't know. Can I think of an instance? No. Do I think that's a sound way of the word could be used in a figurative way? It could be used in with its normal sense within a phrase or within. Okay, go back to Matthew. Shine. So Matthew 13:43, where we said the righteous will shine like the sun. All those words are used with their literal meanings. Like, okay, shine, it just means shine. Sun means sun. But the phrase itself is imagery. Yeah, it's the phrase. It's the clause that gives. Yeah, and the reason you know it's a figurative sense is because, well, unless you're being a hyper mystic, or being really dumb and just because people do this and they go, well, we'll apply a strictly literal hermeneutic here, and we're all going to be a sun in the. All right, Mormons.
Not only do we get our own planet with the light.
No, it grates with what we know will happen to people. We don't think they will actually end up being shining bodies in the sky. We don't think that's going to happen. We don't buy that.
We might. Maybe we skipped over 17. Maybe that's what we'll be a bit more like. Is Jesus is the transfiguration.
There's a lot there. I'm just trying to talk about how we know what language means when it's used in certain ways.
Absolutely.
So when Strong says it can be both and at the same time, it's possible what he means is that the word is used with its normal sense or one of its range of meaning, but in a broader phrase or clause that is being used more figuratively. That's possible, but you're not going to use. You're generally not going to. You're going to, or you might use a word and say, look, you get its normal. Like, okay, back to Ephesians 2:1. The normal meaning of the word, I think it's thanatos there. It's not necros. Or I might have that wrong, but normal meaning of the word of dying or of death is there, ordinary death. But that normal meaning is being used with one of its aspect of that sense to say, well, in some way they're dead, and they're dead in that they're not following after God. They're following after these other things, their passions, the powers of the world. Okay, that means they're kind of like they're dead to God. That's really all it means. So there is that sense. But when we talk about figurative and literal meanings of words, you don't just jump them together. You got to be really careful about that. And so that's why I say just go back to the text and see how it's being used, and then what is the actual point of the use of that language. Yeah. So I don't think Strong's is very helpful.
No, I had a conversation with a friend about Strong's recently, and why, and so let's keep going through.
Okay.
My
we've
brain's
got my
melting when we
illusion.
got to grammar, but I think I'm back on it now.
we got my three statements where I say, look, we're alluding back to other texts, and we've got that one where I'm linking it to Matthew 10:28. So you got Matthew 5:21-30, Matthew 10:28, Matthew 13:40 to 42.
Yeah,
I think that's our background. That's what Jesus is, or Matthew more importantly, because I always look at it, he's the one that made this gospel. He's taken Jesus' words and he's putting them together in a certain way. My wife's leaving for work.
No, why?
And now I'll wait for the cat to come out and meow. That's your background. That's what Matthew's been heading towards. So when we get to Matthew 18, 8-9, and he's saying it's better to pluck your eye out or cut your foot off or cut your hand off than to end up in that place. What is that place? It's Gehenna. It's that fire. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What does it do? It's where you're slain. That's where it's destroyed. What kind of language is this? Oh, it's typically to die. What have you got a contrast here? Same in 5:29-30. The partial destruction of your body versus the whole.
Yeah.
It's a contrast.
Yeah.
And he repeats it. All right. So
there's
a bit of parallelism there.
Yeah. It's not like a little bit of pain in contrast to a lot of pain.
Or even a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Or even a lot. There's nothing in the language at all that speaks about pain that you could say. Like you could say, oh, plucking out is painful. But really, if you look back at 5:29-30, it's about destroying it. Pain is an incidental thing.
Yeah.
It is part of it. Yes, it's a painful death, but it'd be painful to pull your eye out, but that's not the point. And it's not the point either in Matthew 13:40-42, where you've got weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's happening while you're being incinerated. Yeah.
But
even then,
it's not the sadness point. And anger.
Yeah, it's a summary statement. It's not the point. The point is that they're catechia, they're burnt up. And so I don't think that's the main point here either. And now this is really important because this is a really pivotal passage where Matthew's got eternal fire and Gehenna of fire in parallel. So when we get to 25:41, that will be relevant. I won't say much more there.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah.
There's that contrast between partial destruction. It's better to have that partial, it's better to be killed by man, thrown, and even though that's a really bad death, that's a shameful death, not being buried, but having a big millstone thrown. That's better than Gehenna. That's ripping your eye out is better than that big death of the whole person you're going to get. That's characterized or that's said in Matthew 10:28. So partial versus whole. Complete death, complete destruction of your whole person, your whole body.
So where are we taking this? Where do we go from?
Well, that's all I wanted to say is that really that whole passage, you've got to read 18:1-14 as a whole. And I think this is what he's getting at. He's basically just saying here, these little ones, these children, they're important. Then he's jumping off and he's saying, don't cause them to stumble or you'll, it'll be bad for you.
You're
It'd be
bringing
better if you
judgment.
got killed by men. And then he goes on, he says, it's necessary. Woe to the world for temptations, for it's necessary that temptations come. So it's part of the world, but woe to the one by whom temptation comes. So I think from memory, Scandalon's there. So he's casting it back on the ones who cause it. So that's Matthew 13, 40, 41, 42.
Yes,
and then he gives his big statement that if you do that, it's much, don't do that. It's better for you to mutilate yourself than to end up in Gehenna where you'll be fully destroyed. And then he makes a statement. He says, my goal here, my ministry is to go out and rescue people from that fate of Gehenna. That's the kind of language. It's related to that. So he's kind of saying, don't be that person who causes other people to go there, because I'm here trying to rescue people from that fate. It's better if you do things to yourself to stop yourself from doing that to them, because my goal is to rescue them. I don't want you ending up there either. But it's all about being destroyed.
Yeah.
And being rescued from that.
Good. Sounds good. Amen.
That's good. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
I can field questions at the Rethinking Hell group, and people will bring up stuff. That's fine. There's nothing in Matthew 18, 15 to 19.
Yeah.
Much. Again, you do have this statement. He says, I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. That's a reference back to 16. We discussed a little bit of that. But I'm not going to go through that. There's this parable at the end of chapter 18 that traditionalists think supports traditionalism. Are you familiar with that?
Not particularly. So,
can you read it? So it's from 21, so 18, verse 21 to 35. I don't plan to spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah, no one. So to remind myself, all right, I'll probably recognise the argument once I've read it. Peter came up and, let me get this so that people can see it on the screen. 21. There we go. 21. Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Many 7 times. Jesus said to him, I do not say these 7 times, but 77 times. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. I remember. Okay, yeah, I got the argument. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, have patience with me and I will pay you everything. Out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him his debt. But when that same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, it's very little, and seizing him, he began to choke him and saying, pay what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, have patience with me and I will pay you. He refused and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. When his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. His master summoned him and said to him, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? And in anger, his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart.
Interesting that you say 100 denarii isn't much. If you had 100 days of pay and that's what you owed someone, would you think that's a lot of money?
But it's in comparison to the...
Yeah, it is. It is in comparison to, was it 10,000 talents, which is an impossible amount. Nobody could have earned that. But 100 denarii is like 100 days' wages.
Yeah, so it could be earned, and it wasn't in relation to what he originally was forgiven.
Yeah, imagine forgiving that debt. You wouldn't want to, really. Like if I owed you 100, what's your wage? What's your daily wage? And if I owed you 100 days of that wage.
Yeah, it's true.
And I just said, look, you know what? Can I not pay that?
Yeah.
What's when we get to the whole passage, like, so we're looking at the whole. Now, again, Exegesis 101, look at the whole passage. What's the main theme? What's the main theme in this passage? And I haven't just included the parable. I've included the prelude to it.
Yeah. So the forgive, and
that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah. How much should I forgive? But even the initial intro is an allusion back to Lamech, isn't it? It's flipping someone's killed 7. What was it? Abel killed 1. What was it? I've got it. I had it in my mind just then. It's gone. Lamech's little celebration of killing 77 times.
Right, you tell a story. This is yours.
This is mine. I'm just getting Genesis up onto my. Is it 7? Genesis 7. Where does Lamech come up? His little song right early on in Genesis. Someone in the chat can help me out.
I hadn't researched that. I can't just pull it out of my head.
Okay. Lamech. Where's his little song?
Just give a summary.
Here we go.
Yeah, good.
Here we go. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's flipping the avenging to forgiving. That's what I was.
But the question they're posing is, well, how many times must I forgive? Is that right?
Yeah.
So that's what he's saying, and he addresses that with, he expands it out, right? But then that parable, you got people with debts, a king with servants, a servant with a debt. You forgive the debt, don't you? He forgives the debt. So that's the theme that's there, isn't it? That's the predominant theme.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the servant goes out, sees another servant with a minuscule debt compared to the one he was just forgiven of, and he doesn't forgive. Mm-hmm. So what does the king do? So this is the kingdom of heaven. So this is God. So what does the king do? He reverses his original declaration of forgiveness. So he reverses it, and he acts like any tyrant king would have. And that puts the emphasis back on the disciples. The disciples are asking, well, how many times? He said, well, Jesus is saying, well, if you don't forgive, you won't get forgiven.
Mm.
That's the punchline. So the punchline is the very last verse.
Mm-hmm.
It's not being put in jail per se. Yeah. So with parables, they can have more than one point. That's like Craig Blomberg has addressed that basic error of parables having one point. But they can have several points, but not every bit of detail applies. We don't just slavishly apply everything. That's how you get misinterpretations. Now, the question that someone will come back is, I'll say, oh, but maybe it is part of it, and that's part of the punchline. Okay, he's putting them in jail. Jailer there, the word can mean torturer. So this idea they would put him in and they put him in jail until the family would pay it off.
Yeah.
I think the main punchline is that this God will actually act like a tyrant. Thank you, William Tanksley, for that insight. That's good, because that fits with the theme of forgiveness. But just so we factor in, so what is the verse? The penultimate verse.
Which one, the jailer or the final? Sorry.
Yeah, the jailer one. So, in anger, his master delivered him to the jailer. So they're the ones who would torture him until he should pay his debt. So just say someone insists, no, that's part of the punchline. Okay, in normal parlance, so in what would normally happen if your family didn't pay off a debt, you'd die in jail, even if you were tortured.
Yeah.
Like the amount of torture, the amount of time in jail doesn't mean that person's going to be able to pay off a debt. It was the family that would do it. So that person with that amount of debt, 10,000 talents is just something that you could never earn. You could never pay back if you're that servant. So he would remain in jail and he would die there. It's not really saying anything about eternal conscious torment. It just says he'd have a painful death, or he's confined until he dies. But I don't think that's the main point. I think the main point, the punchline is, so also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart. That's answering their question. Yeah. How many times? Well, you just forgive. If you don't, my Father will treat you as you treated others.
Yeah.
That's the point.
You have been forgiven so that you should forgive, which has echoes throughout.
Don't break that passage up and interpret it separately. That's the theme. Yeah. Exegesis 101, that's what we were taught.
Yeah. Agree. And as you say, like it's not about an ongoing living forever torment state. It's you will pay your debt, and if we read Paul's letters well, that debt is death. we pay the wages of sin.
Well, I'm pretty comfortable now saying we've gone through from chapter 1 to 18, and everywhere when we've talked about where Jesus talked about the final fate of those who aren't in that kingdom of heaven, they're slain, they're burnt up. It's got this idea of perishing. Again, inspiration of scripture. I don't think Matthew's an idiot or was an idiot. I think he knew what he was talking about. And I don't think he's suddenly going to give a different picture. He's not going to suddenly talk about eternal conscious torment when he's been talking about death.
Right? It's consistently is
Only way I could get that, I think, with any credit, with any modicum of persuasiveness, if I went from that statement about him being in jail, note that there's torturing involved, and then jump to Matthew 25:46 and said, look, eternal punishment, and then jump to Revelation 14:9-11, and then 20:10.
It's like you've engaged with someone who might do that.
That happens all the time. But
absolutely.
My counter argument is no. Read Matthew for what Matthew's saying. Read Revelation for what Revelation's saying. And then synthesize. And I don't think either Revelation 14 or 20 support in the end. If you know, as Chris State says, on closer examination, they proved to be better support for conditionalism. I think he's right. I think he's got really good exegesis behind that. It's not a vacant statement. It's not a vacuous statement. But none of that means we would reinterpret the rest of the Bible, or we should. Okay, analogy of faith. Okay, all right. Yes, I know. But didactic texts. So this one isn't a didactic text, but there's didactic texts in Matthew that clearly say the final fate of the wicked is their death. Matthew 10:28. The explanation of the parable in Matthew 13. So if we're going to use the analogy of faith, a corollary of that is the clearer texts should be used to interpret the less clear text. By definition, Revelation is the most unclear text we have, and everyone says that until they want to cite those two verses, those two passages.
And then suddenly it's something clear.
And even if you didn't, even if you take Revelation 20 and you take it literally, you just take a strict literal hermeneutic, and you go, okay, you look at it and you go, there's three beings in 2010, they're tormented forever. Okay, we'll accept that. Everyone else dies and is resurrected again. So second death doesn't relate to people who never died, those three entities. It only relates to the people who died the first time, resurrect, their judge are resurrected, and they're going to be thrown in second death. So take that as a literal reading. You still only get three beings being alive forever, being tormented. So there's a whole lot that goes down, and a lot of water that gets got to go under the bridge, and a lot of wading through weeds before you get there. But none of that justifies saying that apocalyptic imagery, that really vague text, despite what they say, they all will say Revelation. Well, most scholars will say Revelation is really a hard one to unpack because of its imagery, at least consistently, and then coming back and saying, let's transpose that on this parable. In Matthew, where we've already got clear statements that Jesus could not have meant that. Could not have.
Yeah.
Matthew 10:28. So it's that's exegesis doesn't mean that we're just going to ignore revelation, but it doesn't mean we're going to use revelation to solve exegetical problems where we haven't done the exegetical work of reading through Matthew. I object to that strenuously. Yeah.
Cool.
What else have we got to say? Nothing.
Yeah, no, there's one last question from Samaran, which we have referenced already in this show, so I wouldn't be able to give you a minute direction, but we have discussed this briefly. No. Yeah, there's no evidence. No archaeological, no.
Slam RN, I can give you a discussion on that in Rethinking Hell, but there is no the basic gist of the response should be there's no archaeological evidence that the Valley of Hinnom was ever a garbage dump. There's archaeological evidence that the Kidron Valley was, or the slope leading to it was, and they buried the pottery there. That was where that's the area. So that's Gehenna's on the southwest side, Kidron's on the southeast side. We know this. Kidron was the garbage dump, and there's no credible literary evidence that Valley of Hinnom, Gehenna, so that valley was ever used as a garbage dump, let alone one that was burning. By that we mean there's nothing contemporaneous to the New Testament literature that states that. The earliest is David Kimchi commenting on the Psalms saying that in the 12th century. That's not good literary evidence. It's just really a myth that scholars got into and scholars have reversed. We're talking about traditional scholars, so George Beasley Murray or whatever. Now, when you say that to people, they want you to prove it. So I do have I've dug up a lot of articles on archaeology, and there's a commentary on the geography. It's a Lexham. You go to Logos, you can buy it. It's about $50-$60 Australian. So it's going to be a lot less than US, maybe 40. But it's a commentary on the geography. Geographical commentary, Lexham geographical commentary of the synoptics or the Gospels. There's a good article in there. There's other detail. So your pastor's just wrong.
Yeah.
He's just repeating what he's learned, and there's actually no evidence for it. There's good evidence against it.
It's frustrating though, because it turns up in all sorts of places by people that just haven't done the work, and it's not that hard to find.
That's the nature of scholarship. That's the nature of learning. That's fine. They've been told that. I've got a friend, David Walcott, who is, we've done one live stream with him for Rethinking Hell Live. I told him that. He asked about it. I gave him the press. Okay. He's okay with it. Others dig their feet in. I don't know why, whatever motivation, what they trust their pastor, that's fine. We just keep putting it out there. Periodically, I post on it for new people that come into groups.
Yeah.
See who wants to buy it, who wants me to discuss it, and but that's one of the issues that I'm absolutely certain on. There is no proof for it.
Yeah.
And it's RT France kept it open. He was an annihilationist.
Yeah.
But he kind of just kept. He knew all this, but he still kept it open. So don't know why, but he did. So it's there. It's in the background.
Yeah. Last question.
Yeah.
Can you recommend lexicon that you use?
Free or
either?
A free one. A good one is that stepbible.org, but you've got to learn to use how to drive it. So. So in other words, looking up a passage, get to the old interface, but it has a really good, free, basic lexicon, which will give you stuff. Now, Strong's is a start. If you want to get an idea, then you go and exegete, but that's got a real lexicon in it. The best ones now are considered BDAG and Low NIDA, but they're not free. They're expensive.
No, they're quite expensive.
They're really expensive. I've got them. I own plenty of others, but they're the better ones. If you want a basic lexicon, Bill Mounts has his website. He has a little dictionary. It's not a lexicon, it's a dictionary. It's not going to be useful for a range of words. But because the out of the public domain lexicons, the older ones like Thayer's and whatever, they're free. They're the ones that end up on the internet, and people think they're as good. They're outdated. Thayer's is terrible. It's outdated. It was written. It was put together when they still thought that the New Testament language was a spiritual language, and they found, like, just a year after that, I think Deisman published this work where he showed how just pottery and other shopping lists and other general literature, just of the general populace, the hoi polloi. The New Testament shares most of that vocabulary. It's just Koine Greek. It's just the normal Greek that you get, and we just have so much more information or access to just the normal language that Thayer's is just don't take it as an authority. So that step.org is the best one for a basic free to access lexicon. You just got to learn how to drive it. So you look up the verse, you click on it, it'll give you the Hebrew and the New Testament. It'll give you a range of meaning. It's pretty reliable in the sense that it'll give you a good sense of the range of meaning, but you still got to go and check it in the specific instance. Even when they give references, sometimes I disagree with them because I've done my exegesis, and sometimes a lot of time I agree with them. I go, yeah, you're right. Because what happens with lexicons is, you've got to understand this, even with BDAG and Leonida, is that they're still working on old traditions. They just went to more examples and refined it, but they haven't been exhaustive. And there's programs now where they're looking at using technology, so the computers, they're looking at collating studies from around the world, and so they're trying to expand our knowledge through computer power and collaboration, our understanding of how words were used diachronically, so that's through history, and synchronically, so how it was used at a given period of time, like New Testament and its literature. They're just trying to be as exhaustive as they can. So these existing good lexicons will be improved on. They'll be outdated. Updated.
Yeah. I think it's really important to almost remind people that just because we're slightly further away from resurrection in the New Testament doesn't mean doesn't mean our understanding of the Bible is getting worse with time, but actually it is getting better, and to some in most areas at least.
We have unique problems. So we have unique problems from, say, the audience from the first century when it was written, when they actually heard it and they saw it and they had direct witnesses. We have a different problem than from the next century, when all they had to do is just use the language when they talked about stuff from the Bible, and people knew it because it was still remote enough. We don't have access to that immediate access to that context. So we have to dig as much as we can. We have to investigate. We have to keep improving our knowledge. Now, they weren't bereft of this in, say, the Reformation or earlier. They were aware of this too. They just didn't have as much access to the tools, didn't have as much access to the background literature, but they did do this. They did actually do a lot of this, and they were aware of these problems. They weren't idiots.
No, you'd end up with like the phrase chronological snobbery.
Yeah. And so this is just a continuation of what they started, and what they did. But because we are more remote, what also happens is that misconceptions can develop and become thought of as definitive. So the garbage dump thing is one example. Because of teaching tradition. So we have to re-examine that again. What's the basis for that? So there's always this continual learning in it. I like that. And so it just grinds me a bit when someone says, look strong. So it's a tool. It's useful, but it's not definitive, and I'll always try and address that.
Yeah, definitely. Cool.
And if I don't know something, I ask Glenn Peoples or William Tanksley or Chris Day, because they know more. Especially Old Testament. Or others.
Cool. Darren, we've gone past the hour 30. And
Yeah.
I think we've answered loads of questions from Slam around. So thank you, Slam, for joining us and asking those questions. Have been really helpful and developed our conversation further. And I hope the answers were helpful. To the other couple of viewers, thanks for watching. And if you said hello in the chat, thank you. Any sort of final thoughts, Darren, before I close up?
Anyone wants to bail me up and challenge me in Rethinking Hell, they're most welcome. I'll obviously give my best shot at defending myself. So any clarification? Thank you for the question, Slam, RN. So there's scope for differences of view on individual texts and how people put things together. Mitch Fogel was giving me Heiser stuff, and I'm going, okay, I couldn't absorb it yet. But I actually, when I was watching, I think that fits for what I want to say anyway. So that's how he challenged me, he moved me on. So I'm understanding the rock bit. Peter is the rock. No, it's not. Okay, good. That's me. That's good. So go to Rethinking Hell and post questions or whatever, and ask me, challenge me, and I'll get Philip to answer my. No, I'll answer questions. But yeah,
I
just
like
generally
giving it a go. But yeah, I've definitely.
The main thing I want to highlight is really with Matthew 18. This is why studying the whole of Matthew is important. Once we get to something like Matthew 18, especially that first part of the chapter, it's really critical. Matthew, to my mind, is harken back. He's alluding back. He's pointing us back. He wants. If you reread. If you hear that, you'd have those texts in mind. You can't mean anything else other than these. Others than see that Gehenna and eternal fire is a place where you'll be slain, destroyed, die. Yeah. But don't jump away from the text. Stay with Matthew. Yeah.
I think. Yeah. And repeatedly, I think I say this every time we've gone. Probably all 10 parts, is each time someone brings up Matthew 25, 41 to 46, you've got a whole book here, 25 chapters previous.
Yeah. And when you get to 25, 41, I will be talking about the allusions or the parallelism with 13, 42, yeah. 36 to 43. All right? I'll talk about it then again. Yeah. And this apocalyptic worldview is really important, but I'll be talking about that then. Yeah. You don't just hang that out there and go, oh, that's the devil's thrown in there with his angels, therefore ECT. Let's go to Revelation. And likewise, I don't really like us going to Jude 7 immediately. I like we going there after we've discussed this.
Agreed. And that's
not having a go at people who do that, in the sense that Jude does talk about eternal fire. It's legitimate, but I want to mine out Matthew and then go, oh, how does that synthesize with what Jude is saying? And how does that how does that fit with with Revelation? Okay. When we exegete those texts, we bring that together and we do our synthesis. Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff.
I should learn how to say English words.
Well, you're struggling with saying them. I don't even know how grammar works, so we're doing all right together.
It just means
this is why
I learned by reading.
I can do the reading bit. That's pretty much what I'm good for. I can read. Darren, it's a pleasure as always. I'll just wrap this up. So do go onto Rethinking Hell Facebook group if you want to chat with Darren or myself. We're both on there. Darren's also been on the podcast for Rethinking Hell recently. Go check that out. I've got a few things.
Rethinking Hell Live.
Rethinking Hell Live,
podcast,
it's on YouTube channel as well. Do check that out. Chris Date's stuff is excellent.
He's my sensei.
Yeah, that's it. There's some aspect of that for me as well. You can find past conversations with Chris Date and Darren on my channel as well. If you want some scripts from some of my other videos, go to thehellproject.online and it's all there. Do this all free. If you are feeling generous, well, feel free to get in touch. But
so not even 100 denarii, eh?
No, even 100. Well, if you want to give me 100 denarii, I'm sure that would
100 days wages.
Out. This is. I'll take it. I'll take it for a cup of coffee.
All right. You
anyway,
do a good job.
We're here to chat, and those of you that have sent us questions in the background. I will get to them eventually, but this is worth digging into. So that's us, and
Thank you.
thank you very much for listening. See you soon. Cool.